Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit. I'm here to ask and answer one simple question. WTF is Bioshock Infinite. Can I be frank with you for a second? I'm going to be anyway, so I'm not sure why I'm asking you. This video terrifies me. The very notion of doing it terrifies me. And the reason is that we're talking about a game that's received universal acclaim across the board and has been declared Game of the Year by so many people 3 months into the actual year. That's intimidating. I think anyone that reviews games, critiques games, does first impressions, or just makes any kind of commentary on a game like this is putting themselves in the line of fire. And it's not necessarily because of fanboys and unreasonable people. It's more down to the fact that when something receives universal acclaim, you have to fight an awful lot harder to actually get any criticism of that taken seriously. One of those reasons, the reasons behind that, is that what you say can be taken as contrarianism. The idea being that you are going against the grain for the sole purpose of attracting attention, rather than saying that you actually have legitimate points. Because at the end of the day, who's going to believe that you were the one guy that happened to have all of these valid criticisms and everybody else missed it? That's the situation that you can sometimes get in when it comes to dealing with stuff like this. And that's especially true early on in the game's life cycle. About 6 months down the line, people start to figure out that the game's not actually as amazing as they thought it was originally because the sparkle wears off, the luster disappears, and people have had time to really thoroughly break down what the game actually is. This is something that very much happened with Skyrim, a game that was lauded across the board, and then about 6 months down the line, people figured out why it was actually not that great, at least in terms of its mechanics, and a bunch of other things about that game. And Bioshock Infinite is still very much in that honeymoon period, where people are saying, this is the game of the year, this is incredible, there's nothing wrong with it, it's literally perfect. I've had people say, without a hint of irony, this game is literally perfect. If you criticize this game, you are an idiot. Oh well. Tough. It's gonna happen anyway. So what is Bioshock Infinite? Bioshock Infinite, of course, is a game by Irrational. It is the third game in the Bioshock series, the second game, of course, not being created directly by Irrational. And this time around, it is not set in Rapture. It is set in Columbia, a flying city. A very American flying city, a very old-school American flying city, in more ways than one, and in fact in a number of very disturbing manners. We'll be going into the story a lot during this video. I will endeavor to avoid spoilers wherever possible. For full disclosure, this is of course a first impressions video, as are all of my WTF Is, and I believe I am approximately halfway through the game, based on what I've seen on lists of zones and things like that. Give or take. So, I've played a good amount. I can't really look at the stats and say how long I've played because I tend to leave my games alt-tabbed while I'm doing other things, so it artificially inflates my playtime, so that won't really be of any use to anybody. As I said, I will try and avoid spoilers. If we run into something during the video, I will mark on the screen. I will put up a text message that says, "Oi, things are going horribly wrong, and you might want to skip here." So I'll do my best to try and protect you guys that actually haven't played this game yet. So, before we start, let's have a look at the options menu. This is important because Bioshock 1 and 2 are fairly notorious for not being great ports. They're also pretty notorious for being games for Windows Live titles, which did not help in any way, shape, or form. Bioshock had some serious DRM issues, it also had issues with widescreen and a whole manner of other things, including the inability to change FOV. It wasn't that good in terms of its actual port. I'm happy to say that Bioshock Infinite is significantly better, although it is not perfect. So if we go to the graphics menu, we will see that there are a number of different options available here, and you also have an FOV slider. Annoyingly enough, for some reason, some companies do this when they put an FOV slider in the game. They don't tell you what the actual field of view is. What I can tell you is that it's about 80 horizontal, which is, it's on the borderline of what's acceptable. 90 is a good number for PC games, has been for a very long time. 80 is tolerable at best. It is possible to increase it by messing around in the INI files, and that, along with many other fixes and workarounds, some of which don't work all that well, are available on PCGamingWiki.com. Aside from that, you can turn on and off highlight searchable and important objects, as well as enemy health bars. I always keep those on because, you know, it's a benefit to you in the game. I don't see why you would turn that off. And you do have the ability to customize some of your graphics quality. If you go to custom, you will see exactly what you can do. I've got this cranked up to max, and I'm running this alternate. We can actually turn that depth of field option on. There we go. That's actually something I did not know about. It's funny, really, because on Ultra, you'd think that everything would be turned on. It's actually not, for whatever crazy reason. Texture filtering, texture detail, dynamic shadows, you know. There's a good amount of stuff here. Being able to turn off ambient occlusion is probably something that will give you a significant frame boost. It tends to pretty much any configuration. And I am playing this on dual SLI NVIDIA Titans. So not too shabby. Yes, I would love to. Thank you. Please don't break. Aside from that, we can go to gameplay, and we'll see stuff like floating combat text. Pretty damn useful. Good amount of feedback available there. I've turned it off mostly for the sake of immersion, really. I don't really find it all... I don't find this game to be something that would require it. Yeah, I don't think it's difficult enough to need it, and the combat isn't really that precise in order to require something like that. This isn't an MMO, so... You know, but it's nice that it's there. Audio-wise, you can turn on and off dialogue subtitles, which is always nice to see. I will turn it on for this particular presentation for the obvious reason that I may end up talking over a small piece of incidental dialogue. Controller. You can use that if you like. I would suggest you turn aim assist off. Some people have been claiming that aim assist defaults on and is very difficult to turn off. Once again, check PCGamingWiki.com for potential workarounds. But I haven't noticed anything particularly obvious in that regard. But then again, it may be that the auto-aim is just so subtle that it's difficult to find. Mouse acceleration, thank God you can turn that off. You know, so overall, menu-wise and PC port-wise, not too shabby. However, the game does suffer some technical issues, including texture streaming bugs, as well as stuttering as the game loads in the background. This appears to be mostly present on NVIDIA cards, although there are widespread reports of this across the board. This is one of the biggest problems with it on a technical level. You can play this at a pretty high frame rate, but the frame rate will randomly tank for no reason in certain areas as the game supposedly loads in the background, and there are certain areas that you go to where the frame rate drops like a rock for no really good reason whatsoever. A good example was in indoor area, I was rocking about 250 FPS, which is more than enough. You know, you'd never need that much. And then I approached a door which I'd previously opened, I might add, and the frame rate dropped to about 50. Now, obviously that's still perfectly playable, but the fact that there is such a huge frame rate drop is indicative of some optimization problems here and there in the game, and I'm noticing highly variable frame rates across the board. Okay, let's get into the game and let's get into the meat of it, shall we? Now, as much as I would love to, you know, show you a separate save file, I can't really do that. You can load chapters, which is quite nice, although you'll be losing a lot of progress. The game, unfortunately, has elected to only go with one save file and no quick save option. I am told that this was a deliberate decision by Irrational Games because they did not want save scumming to be an issue, which is kind of weird because as far as I'm concerned, that's individual choice more so than anything else, and it's not like the game actually has any meaningful choices within it to promote save scumming to begin with in order to end up not making a worthwhile and long-lasting decision. Really odd. There is a workaround, once again, on PC Gaming Wiki that involves you mucking around with your save files, but yeah, it's not ideal, and the checkpoints are unfortunately way too far apart in places, so if you quit in the middle of an area, you may find yourself actually having to go through 10 plus minutes of content to get back to where you started, which is not good. I don't agree with checkpoint systems at the best of times. I especially don't agree with them when you're in a situation where the checkpoints are far too far apart. Bear in mind, this is a game that encourages you to go off the beaten track, which means that you will not necessarily trigger those checkpoints. You'll spend a lot of time in side rooms where the checkpoints don't exist. You won't hit that trigger. And then you say, oh, right, gotta go for dinner, gotta go look after the kids or whatever, and then you come back and, oh, great, I lost 10 plus minutes of progress. That's not the end of the world, but it's kind of annoying. All right, in we go. As I said, we'll be trying to avoid spoilers as best as possible, but just bear in mind that the nature of this game means that almost everything within it could be considered a minor spoiler. That is simply the nature of it. Alright, welcome to Bioshock Infinite, the bold and the beautiful. And it really is, isn't it? It's a very, very impressive piece of technology when it comes to actually looking at it. This is a modified Unreal 3 engine game. And immediately what you're struck by is the way that the world is actually designed. The lighting, the colors, the variety in that regard. If I were to pop out here, we can have a look at just that. And we can see exactly what's going on, but it looks like we might be getting into it. Yeah, we're getting into a little bit of fighting by the looks of it already. So we'll talk about the world a little bit later, and I can talk about the combat system, which sounds like a good idea, because the combat system is... This is going to be my biggest problem with the game, and it's actually kind of a huge problem, which is really unfortunate. So, what do you spend most of Bioshock doing? Yeah? If you've played any of the previous Bioshock games, you can probably answer me that. There's two main components to Bioshock. There's exploration and there's fighting. And you'll spend maybe half your time fighting and half your time exploring, looking for loot and things like that. So, the problem, well, probably one of the biggest issues with the original Bioshock was the fact that the combat system really wasn't very good. Which was most certainly unfortunate. The problem with Bioshock Infinite is that the combat system isn't very good. And you would think that that's something that they would have tried to improve, but it seems like they haven't. So, I have a laundry list of issues with the combat system. And since it is what you spend most of your time in the game doing, at least 50% of your time in the game doing, this is something that you do need to consider and you cannot, under any stretch of the imagination, actually ignore. It's a pretty piss-poor idea. If you want to turn around and say, oh, well, the combat system's not important, then I have to ask you, what game are you playing here? Because last I checked, I was firing a lot of bullets, a lot of rockets and grenades and all sorts of other stuff, and I was doing a lot of fighting. So, let me go down the list. There's a bunch of little things, and then there's the overall feel of the combat. So let me start with the bugbears, the little things. The issues that I have with the combat. Firstly, this game uses a two-weapon system, which is not the same as previous Bioshock titles. On consoles, these titles, for the most part, had a weapon wheel. On PC, you were able to select more than two weapons. Now, there is a fallacy associated with this idea. That fallacy is that the two-weapon system in video games forces you to make tactical choices as to your loadout. It forces you to think about the enemies you're going to be engaging and then adjust your loadout appropriately rather than being prepared for every possible situation. The problem with that idea is that it is wrong. It is a fallacy, pure and simple. Why is it a fallacy? Well, talk to me about forcing tactical decisions when you have absolutely no idea of what's coming at you. The answer is, that's BS. You cannot do that. You cannot think about strategy and plan ahead against the enemies you're going to be facing because you have no idea what those enemies are actually going to be, and at no point in the game does it indicate. So that is not something you can do. Secondly, what weapons you are using appears to be entirely dependent on the whimsy of the game. Is there a shotgun lying around? Because if there is, then that's what you get to use. Is there a hand cannon lying around? Is there a volley gun that you can either summon in or just lying around? And do you have enough money to refill the ammunition for said guns? Chances are you will get ammunition regardless, because Elizabeth has a tendency of tossing ammunition at you, which, handily enough, regardless of the fact that there is no ammo in the vicinity for that particular weapon at all, just so happens to be the exact ammo that you need at that particular time. Contrived in game, yeah, no, but hey. Of course, you can buy pretty much whatever ammo you need, and ammo is incredibly cheap in this game. I mean, it's $8 pretty much for every single thing, and it's not hard to find ammunition. Plus, you get a lot of money, and Elizabeth will occasionally toss you money at random, kinda like that. She will often do it after you have used a vending machine, which is awfully convenient. It's almost like she does that on purpose. So no, I do not agree that the two-weapon system is in any way beneficial, and it stifles the variety of the combat. This is not the case in every game, but it is, in my opinion, the case in Bioshock. Please bear in mind that the previous Bioshock games did allow you to use more than two weapons. Alright, what else? These weapons, unlike the previous Bioshock games, do not, in fact, have special ammo types. Now, Bioshock was never really known for its weapon variety. And even in Bioshock 2, where they had interesting, quote-unquote, stuff like the rivet gun, and stuff like that, and the drill, in reality, the rivet gun was just a carbine, essentially. It was just a rifle. And it was a nice looking rifle, but it was still just a rifle. There were a few interesting weapons in the original Bioshock, like the crossbow and the chemical thrower, but for the most part, weapons were fairly generic, and that's a problem that the Bioshock series has suffered. However, it got around it by having different ammunition types. There are no special ammo types of any description in Bioshock Infinite. Why? I have no goddamn idea. Does it just not fit with the world? Maybe. But if we want to talk about things that don't fit with the world, we could talk about Vigors, and that's something I'll be getting onto a little bit later on. This, unfortunately, once again means that there is a severe lack of variety in the actual combat itself, simply because you do not have access to special ammunition types, and as a result, these pretty boring guns remain pretty damn boring guns. There are a couple of different variants on them, like for instance this. This is ammo for the burst gun, which is a variant on the carbine. The repeater is a variant on the machine gun, but these variants are fairly basic. They are minor reskins of the guns, and for the most part, they have slightly different effects. Like the repeater, the Vox repeater, fires slightly slower, but does more damage than the regular machine gun. It's not exactly all that interesting. I should also mention, just in general, that the weapon variety is just very boring. We're talking about pistol, machine gun, rifle, sniper rifle, rocket launcher, grenade launcher. That's pretty much it. And a couple of little variants here and there. There is no standout weapon in this game. I mean, maybe you could talk about the crank gun, but at the end of the day, that is just a chain gun. And it's something that you gain access to for a brief period of time, and then you don't get it anymore. You can't actually get ammo for that thing outside of killing very specific enemies. Alright, I guess we're going to be making our way through here. So overall, weapon variety and just generally interesting weapons are fairly non-existent. Not so good. That's something I would have hoped that they would have at least kept on the level of the other Bioshock games. But they didn't manage it somehow. Not really sure how that happened, but that's just the way of it. Now, what else? No research camera. So, you know, that was an additional mechanic within the Bioshock games. The research camera was an interesting little twist on things, but that isn't there anymore. I can kind of forgive that, because I think it was a little bit janky, it was somewhat contrived, but it did very much feel like it was part of the Bioshock world. You know, it was a very scientific world. Everything was about weird science in Bioshock 1 and 2, and crazy morality and all sorts of different issues like that. You know, that is not something which is really a factor within Bioshock Infinite. It's alright, it'll respawn me with no damage as far as I can tell when I take damage from that, so it's all good. So, you know, that's not really a big deal. I'm okay with the lack of research camera. That's totally fine. Also, boring weapon upgrades. Yeah, the weapon upgrades in this game are just flat out dull. Plus damage, plus ammo, less recoil. There is not a single weapon upgrade in the entire game that I view as standout interesting. Whereas in Bioshock 2, the final level upgrade for pretty much every gun was always interesting. There was one that would reflect bullets back. There was one that had a kind of electrocution ability and things like that. These ultimate weapon upgrades within Bioshock 2 were quite interesting. There isn't any of that in Bioshock Infinite. And I have done my research, it is not there. That is disappointing. However, that is kind of dealt with by the fact that you have something new. Let me try and show it to you, if I can actually remember the goddamn keys for it. There we go. Gear. Welcome to gear. So, you have 4 equipment slots, which allow you to equip various different items. For some inexplicable reason, the UI is very, very small here. I believe that's because it's a UI scaling issue at higher resolutions, because this was designed as a console game. So you can get various different hats and things like that, so if you happen to be into Team Fortress 2, you will enjoy this immensely. I'm wearing the Hill Runner's hat right now, but I've got other options. Throttle control, quick-handed, burning halo, electric touch, things like that. I might switch over to quick-handed for a moment, especially since I'm using the hand cannon and things like that, so I might equip that. For some reason, where the hell are all the boots in this game? Will someone explain that to me? I've been exploring every nook and cranny of this world. I'm pretty sure I haven't missed a lot, and I haven't found a single pair of boots, yet I've got like 50 shirts and 75 hats. This really is Team Fortress 2, for God's sake. But these all have interesting effects, and honestly, they do allow you to customize your playstyle and your combat style in a pretty fantastic manner, and I very much appreciate the gear system. And a lot of this really interesting varied gear is something you will find via exploration, so it is going to reward you for that. So it does kind of replace the notion of those ultimate weapon upgrades, and it also replaces some of the plasmid and tonic stuff that you were getting in the original Bioshock. So I think Gear's probably a more elegant solution versus plasmid and tonic. I think that's actually a better idea. I'm deliberately moving slowly here to avoid spoilers. We'll see if there's a bit of exploration to be offered here. Not a huge amount by the looks of it, but we might be able to find something. Always good to have a look-see. Bioshock rewards you for doing that. Find ourselves weapon upgrade place. This is a prime example of the weapon upgrades, by the way, and the fact that they just aren't all that interesting. Fire rate, reload. I mean, they're powerful, don't get me wrong. We're talking about, I mean, I've got a recoil dampening upgrade for my machine gun, which I'm barely ever using anymore, which reduces it by about 75%. Oh, look, another coin after accessing a vending machine. I wonder how that could have happened. Anyway. But even though they're effective, they're not particularly interesting. I would have liked to see some cooler stuff, and you know, there's just not a lot of imagination there. Now, actual enemies. Bit bullet spongy in places, not entirely, but in some cases. Some of the larger enemies, the heavy hitters as they call them, are enjoyable to fight, and some of them are really, really annoying. I find the handymen just to be massive annoying-ass bullet sponges that throw you around the place, and they're just a grind. However, dealing with stuff like the Patriots, where you target the gears on the back of them, gives you all sorts of very interesting combat styles and mechanics, and the ability, of course, to distract the enemy with traps and things like that is very, very cool indeed. So, for the most part, the game sort of suffers from a bit of a lack of enemy variety, but that's actually a Bioshock thing. You know, every Bioshock game has suffered from that. I don't excuse the game for doing that. I don't think that that's a worthwhile thing to do at all. You should never really excuse the game for failing to provide decent enemy variety. There's like 4, maybe 5 kinds of heavy hitter in the game, and then a few kind of standard enemies, and that's really about it. Obviously, they will occasionally use different weapons here and there, but I would have liked to see more enemy variety. That would have made the combat way, way more interesting. As much as I would have liked to also see a lot more exploration around this area, it looks like it's going to be one of those fairly linear corridors. Alright, let's rock and roll. Now, what I do like about the combat system is the addition of something called the Sky Rail. Now, the Sky Rail allows you to jump onto this little monorail / zipline kind of system and zip around the place. You can then jump off it onto enemies, you can move at a high speed to evade enemy bullets, and it adds this rather fantastic feel of speed and dynamic nature to the combat. Unfortunately, not every area allows you to use the Sky Rail. In fact, more often than not, there is not a Sky Rail available, and the best thing you can do is ask Elizabeth to bring in via a rift a freight hook, which allows you to jump onto it and then jump onto somebody else, which is nowhere near as interesting as the roller coaster ride or the Sky Rail. But the system is very enjoyable. It's a lot of fun, and I think it's one of the better additions to the game. Let's talk about the other side of combat before we really talk about what I don't like about the gunplay. The other side of combat, aside from shooting people, is Vigors. So, Vigors are plasmids. Yeah, they are plasmids. Let's just say it the way that it is. And there are various ones available. Currently, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I believe there are 8 in total in the game. I've got Possession, I've got this Devil's Kiss, which is basically a fireball you can throw, a fiery grenade. All of these can also be set as traps, by the way, which is fairly basic. I mean, you just kind of hold the button down, then throw it on a wall or throw it on the floor, and it will activate if someone walks over it. Lightning, which does exactly what you would think, and Bucking Bronco, which is basically a kind of a force push. Murder of Crows is kind of the same as Bees was in Bioshock. In fact, a lot of these powers are. Aside from Possession, actually no, Possession was in it too. I have to wonder, I mean, is there slightly, I think there are actually slightly less Vigors in this game than there were plasmids within Bioshock. So, yeah, that's kind of weird. They are, however, satisfying to use, and they do a pretty damn good job of ensuring that the game itself and the combat stays reasonably varied up. They compensate significantly for the lack of ability to use more than 2 guns. However, amusing. Yeah, have some food. I'll get you busy. And then I'm gonna steal all your stuff. Because why not? Oh, man. Some coins, thank you. The problem with the Vigor system is that even once you've significantly upgraded the amount of salts you can use, you kind of burn through Vigors in combat very, very quickly, and you're left to rely on Elizabeth, who will occasionally throw you salts like once a fight. So you don't really get to use Vigors in the most creative ways because you are very limited in what you can do with them. Otherwise, you will just very simply end up burning out of salt energy very, very easily. Also, you often end up finding yourself going into a fight without full salt energy, simply because there is the ability to hack, quote-unquote, the vending machines to spit out a bunch of money, which you can do by using... Oh, nice. You can do by using your possession ability, and that takes a lot of salts. So you often, more often than not, end up in a fight where you don't have full salts before you actually engage. So you'll throw off a few Vigors here and there. It's like, oh, suddenly I'm out of it. Suddenly I am out of it. Now, there is another element of the combat, and that's the notion of the tears. You saw me use them earlier. It allows you to make certain choices in certain areas of the game. Now, I say certain areas because not all combat areas actually have tears, and it takes several hours to actually find combat areas that do. These allow you to summon in something like a weapon, a stack of health kits, a gun turret, a patriot to help you out, and so on and so forth. That kind of thing. Ooh, gear. Delicious. Is it a pair of boots? No! Because it never will be. Huh, that's sort of helpful and interestingly situational. I've got to say, by the way, that the gear is nicely varied, and I think the gear is one of the biggest strengths of this game. Where they've kind of fallen down on weapon upgrades and things like that, gear does make up for it in a pretty big way, because some of this stuff is very imaginative. I love the stuff that's tied into the skyline because it encourages a very kinetic style of combat where you're constantly moving and trying to use your terrain to your advantage. Pretty damn cool. Thank you. Alright, now let's talk about the biggest problem I've got with the combat, and that is the actual gunplay. And that's a big deal because this is what you're going to be doing an awful lot of. I'm in a mostly passive area right now, which is, you know, kind of neat. I mean, I could always engage here, and I probably will end up engaging here, and then I'll just end up in a combat zone until the end of bloody time. The gunplay isn't that good, and that's been a consistent problem within the Bioshock series. It is a game that originated from the notion of an RPG, and I say that because Bioshock is the spiritual successor to System Shock 1 and 2, which was a first-person RPG. What that means is that while they tried to make it more FPS-y and took away some of the mechanics, thank you very much, took away some of the mechanics that were based within RPG tropes, they have not made it a particularly good first-person shooter. In terms of straight combat mechanics, no, they haven't. I would love to tell you that they had, but it is simply not true. Now, to me, it almost feels like they've been struggling with this idea and this transition. That seems to be the impression that I'm getting, which is kind of weird, really, because I'm kind of surprised they couldn't just sort of break out of the notion that this was going to be a problem for them. Maybe they're just not good at it. That's a possibility. Not every developer is really, really good at making excellent first-person shooter mechanics. Now, let me explain why I think that the people that claim that this is an improvement are kind of wrong. Some people have said, oh, well, you know, it's a big improvement on the other Bioshock games, which also were not all that great at actual straight-up shooting. Their actual FPS mechanics were weaker than the rest of the game. So, I think it really comes down to how the combat feels, yeah? For one thing, it's pretty slow, and not tactically slow either, it's just clunkily slow. You're using weapons that just aren't really all that interesting to shoot or fire. You're not using fast-paced combat mechanics unless you happen to be on the sky rail. So you're not really going to be leaping around doing crazy rocket jumps and all stuff like that, which is fine because a lot of games don't really do that anymore, yeah? However, you're talking about modern military shooter slow mechanics and fairly boring hit-scan gunplay combined with a fantastic and incredibly well-realized and unbelievably imaginative world. And you realize how much of a disappointment it is to have that happen. It's a damn big disappointment. It is a damn big disappointment because it's such a shame. It's like, wow, this world. This is like someone's magnum opus. This is their ultimate symphony. it's a masterpiece. And then you suddenly find parts of it which are like, oh, this bit is not that great. That's disappointing, isn't it? It's problematic. It really, really is. Very much so. Whoops. Oh, well, never mind. Can I do 360 jumpy no-scope? That would be nice. I actually might be able to pull that off, you know. And up. Hey! I'll be doing MLG in no time. Never mind, I did slightly damage, but hey, it's cool. Relax, I'll edit that in post. So, these weapons are pretty hit scan for the most part. The machine gun, the hand cannon. The hand cannon's actually super accurate for no apparent reason. None of the weapons have any real kick to them. None of them have any recoil patterns. They use the standard, oh, if you keep firing, the cone of fire expands idea, instead of kicking up or anything along those lines. That's kind of a big sign of a console shooter, because handling that kind of recoil with a controller is much harder to do than with a keyboard and mouse. If you've ever played Counter-Strike, you'll know what recoil patterns actually are. And if you don't, well, you're probably just a bad Counter-Strike player, and you should probably learn what recoil patterns are. Pretty damn important, thank you. This game doesn't have anything like that. And I've tried doing various spreads with different weapons. The hand cannon... I mean, the hand cannon basically just does the same thing every time. Like, it will hit the same spot every time regardless. You could just fire as fast as possible with that thing, and it doesn't matter. The machine gun is the one that spreads the most, but again, it spreads kind of randomly. You can't really control it outside of just burst firing, which means the combat is not particularly skillful, which is unfortunate. And overall, like, sound assets-wise, while the game has some amazing sounds, the weapons really, really don't. There are some seriously tinny sounds going on with it, and they are just not that fun to shoot. Problematic, in my opinion. Very, very problematic indeed. Give me some ammo, thank you very much, which conveniently looks like a carbine, but don't worry, it will have ammo for whatever I'm holding, including the damn grenade launcher. But hey, you know, that's just how it works. So, overall, the combat, it just isn't all that good. You may notice there's a shield involved in it. That's definitely a difference compared to what we saw previously. The shield was not part of the previous Bioshock games. It regenerates, and health you have to sort out by... You can actually hit that with a volley gun from here? Probably not. Your health you kind of have to sort out simply by... grabbing medical kits and food for whatever reason. We'll come on to the whole stuffing yourself full of random food a little bit later on. It's incredibly bizarre. There we go. Let's go for a bit of slidey-slidey. The shield is obnoxious in the terms of its effect. I mean, that's probably the only real complaint that I've got about the shield is the fact that it just looks annoying. It pops out and it ends up being something which really obscures your vision and is really, really obnoxious to look at. So... it's, you know, it's not really all that well executed in my honest opinion. Let's have some health, thank you very much. Good, good, good. What am I getting shot by? Oh, it's you. There we go. Hey, look at it. It's just, it obscures the damn screen. It's irritating as hell. It's this weird contrivance as well. It's like, oh, you have a magnetic shield. I'm like, really? Where the hell did I get that? Such a bizarre damn idea in the first place. Don't worry, most of the terrain, as far as I'm aware, in fact, maybe all of it, is not destructible, so I can sit behind this wooden log till the end of time, until someone decides that they really want to try and kill me, which this guy apparently does, but don't worry, he's more interested in a little bit of slip and slide than anything else. So this is what you spend half the game doing, and unfortunately, it just isn't all that enjoyable. It is functional and serviceable at best, but as I just explained for about like half an hour, there is a laundry list of problems associated with it. I'm hoping to kind of get out of this combat area so I can focus on talking about the exploration and a lot more positives about the game. It might seem that I'm being hypercritical. Not hypocritical, jackasses, learn to spell. Hypercritical. And I kind of am, because I feel that a lot of reviews have missed out on doing that entirely. Maybe it was in the rush just to get the review out and things like that early on, because, hey, you get a lot of traffic that way, so it's generally a pretty good idea. But overall, what I'm finding is that a lot of reviews seem to be missing a huge amount of problems that the game actually has, and they're glossing over them. And you know what? If you want a really positive review of this game, there's like 50 plus of them you can very easily find. So I want to try and provide you something that's not. And the reason I want to do that is to provide you an alternate perspective, so that hopefully you get a really good idea about this game before you actually decide to pick it up. You know, my opinion versus 50 positive reviews probably doesn't mean all that much, but what's the point in me repeating what everyone else has been saying? There isn't one. There is no point in that at all. It's a waste of your time and mine. So, you know, I'm not the kind of person that likes to waste your time. Even though my videos are ridiculously long. Alright. I'm still trying to destroy these defense turrets. I assume that things are just going to continually respawn until I actually do. So, hey, there you go. Oh, God. Let's grab a hold of that defense turret just to give me a little bit of an edge here. There we go. Thank you very much. Possessing defense turrets is always quite enjoyable and rather useful. Unfortunately, they will turn on you after a while, which is unfortunate. Ugh. This is going to turn on me any second, actually. I'm just getting ready to blow it up. Yep, that would be now. Thank you very much. God, these defense turrets are irritating. Can I just blow it up with that? Yeah, I can. It's almost like a mini-boss fight. Not a fun one, either. It's like, please stop shooting me from everywhere. Let's get on this damn skyline and rock and roll. Some medical kits down there. There's one thing I will say about the combat, actually, before I move on to everything else. Considering we're still fighting, I might as well talk about this, and that's the difficulty level. So, they did well this time around, because Bioshock actually was not a very difficult game. Neither was Bioshock 2. Bioshock 2 did a little bit better, but not by much. Bioshock Infinite does a significantly better job at making a challenging combat experience. And I'm not even playing it on 1999 mode. I am playing on hard. Pretty much everyone I've spoken to has recommended to play it on hard, because on normal the game is quite easy, which is unfortunate. You know, it's just not all that entertaining as a direct result. Which kind of sucks. But it's pretty good on hard. Like, this is a nice balanced difficulty level. I have no real desire to play it on 1999 mode, which, while it promised some stuff like permanent and meaningful choices, doesn't actually have anything of the sort. Feel free to look up an FAQ as to what 1999 mode actually does, and I can guarantee it's none of that. Which is unfortunate to say the least. But I like the difficulty level. I think it's well balanced and provides a challenge. Yes, when you die, you get respawned. You do lose some cash. So, you know, that there is definitely a reason not to die. And the enemies regain some health as well. So you can't just really scum them in the way that you could just run back to... Yeah, I'll grab an RPG, thank you. In the way that you could just run back to an injured Big Daddy and then hurt it and just keep, like, working your way through it over and over again. These permanently respawning enemies are damn annoying, though. There aren't all that many areas in the game, as far as I know, that really do this, but every now and again you'll find one, and it's just bloody irritating. They're gonna keep... I would love to take this. Just give it to me. Thank you. There we go. Wonderful. You can leave. Oh, God, I need to kill these gun turrets. Where's the other one? I'm sure I'll find it eventually. Let's just summon the rocket automaton back in. That should help me out a little bit. And then I can take cover over here. Alright, let's talk about the other part of Bioshock. The other part of pretty much every Bioshock game ever, which is the notion of exploration. Exploration is tied intrinsically into looting stuff. So, this is probably one of the ugliest areas in the game. Which is actually kind of a compliment, because it's a well-realized and even pretty in its own industrial way. Don't damage your allies. Oh yeah, I must have hit the rocket turret. Whoops. Not quite what I was aiming to do there. God damn it, these guys are relentless. Where is that other turret? And I could take the bloody thing out, or at least try to. There we go. Bring in one of those, that should help. And then get behind here. This world is gorgeous. It is one of the most gorgeous, most well-realized worlds I have seen in video games in my 23 years of playing them. Actually, 24 years. Maybe 24 and a half. It is unbelievably beautiful. And this is a work of art. It is someone's magnum opus. In fact, it's an entire team of incredibly talented people's magnum frickin' opus. And at no point should anyone try and take away from that. Because holy crap, they would be so stupid if they did. It is gorgeous. And not just, I mean, I'm not just talking about, like, aesthetic quality, because if I wanted to bitch about texture quality, I could. I found some areas of the game where the texture quality sucked. There's a fairly infamous screenshot now of the roses, which are, like, two-dimensional and don't look particularly good. I actually found a giant statue in the game that looks hideous. I took a screenshot of it and put it on Twitter, and people claimed I was hacking the game or something, because they refused to believe there's anything wrong with Bioshock frickin' Infinite, but hey. Yeah, whatever. Some people are just silly. There we go, and you can have some of this as well. Here, have some crows. Thank you. I haven't really been using Vigors all that much. I probably should use it a little bit more. try and... There's a Patriot down there. I need to at least sort of knock him about a little bit. However, is the exploration actually any good? For the most part, yeah. So, because it is Bioshock, it is a world where the world itself tells the story. Yeah? And generally speaking, the world itself tells the story way, way better than anything else would. Yeah? Like, if you were to just say, oh, I'm going to tell the story through a bunch of exposition with dialogue. That's not as strong as the way Bioshock has traditionally told its stories. Because Bioshock shows you things. And it also leaves a lot to the imagination and a lot of conclusions that you yourself have to actually make. Which is, in itself, pretty fantastic. And... lol. And I would say that if you want to design your game really well and you want to do a reasonably open world game which encourages exploration, you have got to do that stuff. You've got to have the world tell various stories. And Bioshock Infinite does that, and it does it particularly well. There's a hell of a lot to discover if you know where to look and you know what to look for. And there are also a bunch of things which you can interpret in a variety of very interesting ways. And I appreciate that greatly. That's one of the things I've always loved about the Bioshock series, and one of its greatest strengths. Alright, let's have a little bit of a turn around here. I believe we're going this way. There's a navigation arrow, by the way, if you get lost. That gets turned off in 1999 mode, and is also completely optional, so if you don't want it, cool. But right now, I'm, like, only half focusing on the game, because I'm trying to make my thoughts coherent and reasonably eloquent, so, you know, it's a little bit tricky. However, while the exploration is a lot of fun to do, what I've really noticed is that Bioshock Infinite seems to be curiously more linear than the other two games. I don't remember a lot of instances where there were a huge amount of scripted events that basically sent you through what was an obfuscated corridor, or literal corridor at some points. And yet Bioshock Infinite actually has a significant amount of that. And that's kind of shocking to me. That is not the sort of stuff that I would have expected from a Bioshock game. Not at all. It surprises me greatly. There are side rooms and there are certain areas like town squares that are very explorable. All sorts of things to find. But there seem to be less of those than there were in the previous Bioshock games. And if you want to know why that is, I think it's because of this woman right here. The fact that you're kind of tied to this woman's fate and she accompanies you actually causes a lot more linearity in the game, because the game likes to spring scripted events on you in order to heighten the tension. I'll talk more about Elizabeth later on, because I feel that Elizabeth is a very important discussion topic. You know, she's integral to the game, she's a vital part of it, and there's a lot to say about her as an AI companion, as well as just an NPC and a main character. So, there's a few little nitpicks that I've got. Now, I would like to just point out before I go on, because I guess some people might be taking this the wrong way. Here's the reality of the situation. Not all complaints are created equal. So let's say I have 25 negative points about this game and only 5 positives. That does not mean the game is bad. I don't work on scoring systems because they're dumb and arbitrary and stupid and dumb. And more dumb. These complaints that I'm coming up with were not created equal. I present these to you because some people have different preferences to others. I know, shocking really, isn't it? There are some things which I find to be bugbears. There are other things that I really like, whereas other people really hate them. Some people don't care about some of the stuff that I care about. And so on and so forth, blah, 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 blah. You get the idea. Anyway, a couple little bugbears and nitpicks about the exploration. The food system is stupid. Bioshock Infinite hunger, apparently. I mean, it's actually kind of ridiculous. So you stuff down food, any piece of food you can get your hands on. Hot dogs, cotton candy. I cleaned out a cart of cotton candy. There was like 12 sticks of it. I ate all of it and regained about 20% health. It's just so silly. I mean, in a game that's trying to make you take it seriously at every possible turn, the notion that you can go up to a cart of cotton candy or a hot dog stand and literally just scarf it all down is ridiculous. It plays like an alternate reality version of Freaky Eaters. Are you serious? I realize that they don't want to have the whole traditional health kits thing, even though they have it anyway. Although you can't carry them around at this point, so maybe they just wanted to get away from the idea of potion popping, but they have significantly limited what you can carry, and any kind of inventory system that this game would have possibly had is just evaporated into thin air. And it's unnecessary as well, because some of the actual food in the game gives you, like, minus salts. I was like, what? Minus salts? Really? So I have to be careful about what I eat. Lol. Considering you can stuff down 20 cotton candies and it has absolutely no health impact on you whatsoever. I have to watch what I eat because I might accidentally lose a bunch of salts. And the game's inventory system and the way that you pick items up isn't designed to do that. The game is designed for you to find everything you can and mash F. I didn't have much health there, so that was pretty predictable. No big deal, she's gonna revive me and I'll be right back to kind of where I started. I lose a bit of health, but no big deal. And it turns out that dying here was beneficial because I found a lockpick kit. Sweet. There's an example. Plus health minus salt. That sucks, doesn't it? If you drink enough beer, you do get drunk, by the way, which is a nice little throwback to games like Deus Ex and, you know, games that just simulated that. In fact, actually, wasn't that in the original Bioshock as well? Probably. But it's a silly little thing. What isn't a silly little thing is the fact that audio logs have made their return. I'm not going to play this because it could be considered a spoiler. But the audio logs are back in the game in full force, and I very much appreciate them because they add a huge amount of context to the areas in the game and what's actually going on. And they're vitally important because while this game does have a lot more NPCs, they don't talk to you. So it doesn't actually really matter all that much. Or more, I should say you can't have a conversation with them. They do talk to you, but you can't really talk back at them. Uh-oh. Patriot on the way. I'm gonna have to handle this, so, you know, my apologies as I deal with this little bastard. I say little bastard. It's okay, I'm immune while catching stuff because the game says so. Let's mow away at the gears there, do as much damage as we can. Uh-oh. Yeah, this is gonna get messy. Ah! As I said, you know, combat's not easy on hard mode. Plus, you know, I'm not really concentrating. NPCs, this world is actually full of them. And that is a weird, weird thing in a Bioshock game because, oh, you can't be serious. You're not really going to come here, are you? Right? In a Bioshock game, why would there be so many NPCs? And usually there aren't. Usually this is not something that actually happens in Bioshock, but this case, yeah, they put a lot more NPCs in it because they wanted this to feel like a living, breathing world, as opposed to, I'm just going to repeatedly die here to kill this, by the way, because I'm stuck here with no ammo, which is stupidly annoying, and this guy's just going to spawn camp me till the end of time by the looks of it. Fun times. So I'll swap out. Oh, I have some ammo for my crank gun, not sure where I got that from. Did I kill it? Oh, I guess I killed it. Nice. I think I'm going to swap that out for this. The NPCs have this really weird quality to them, in that you don't really feel that they're actually there at all. It's mostly because they don't really interact with you in any way. Most of them just completely ignore you. Those that don't ignore you don't really seem to be doing anything. They don't really try to simulate the day-to-day life of Columbia. And maybe I shouldn't expect them to, because, you know, this isn't Skyrim or Oblivion with its radiant AI, lol. Yeah, that was a joke. Oh, you can't be serious. I didn't kill it. God damn it. Oh, man. Yeah. Some freaking damage. Thank you. Some more of that. I can't really concentrate while a Patriot's trying to kill me. These guys are right bastards. Alright. Better. Much better. NPCs just, they don't serve any practical purpose. They're window dressing. Like, the game is desperately trying to convince you that this is a living, breathing city. Whereas Rapture, of course, you know, that was it was kind of a disaster. It had decayed. I mean, there's very little decay from what I can see in Columbia. It is very much an active place where people live. Or at least that's what the game is trying to convince you of. And I'm not convinced by it. It's a facade. Very much so, I feel. And that's really unfortunate. They didn't seem to do a particularly good job of making out like it was a real working world. There are times when my suspension of disbelief isn't required, where I'll walk into where it's like, yeah, there's kind of town square, there's a shop here and there, and there's little vendors selling stuff, and so on and so forth. That seems like it would make sense, but you just look beneath the surface and you can see that there's really nothing going on. And since you never really hear anything all that interesting from them, you can hear some stuff in passing, but you can't have conversations with the NPCs in any way. It's kind of annoying. A lot of the stuff's really scripted. There's an area early on where Elizabeth is dancing with a bunch of NPCs, and it's like, press F to get Elizabeth's attention. Elizabeth will dance with those NPCs until the end of freaking time. Like, you could sit there for 6 hours, and the NPCs will continually dance and not notice you in any way. And it's like, this was a little scripted thing. And it's a facade. It is... It's a film set, and that's unfortunate that they weren't able to hide that better. With Bioshock, they didn't really have to, because the only NPCs in that game were either actively out to help you or actively trying to kill you. There was no middle ground. No middle ground. Which actually was a good thing, because you never had to suspend that disbelief. Either everyone's a psycho splicer, or there are the few NPCs, the antagonists in the game, or the few guys that are trying to help you out. That was what Bioshock was. Here, though, there is a all-star cast of people that do jack all. That sucks. That's really unfortunate. Not to mention the fact that there's this weird areas that in the game where there's NPCs kind of going about their daily business. Most of them are just in an animation loop. Like, you can watch NPCs scrubbing the same bit of floor for 6 hours and they just won't move or anything along those lines. They'll just sit there not talking for hours on end. They just don't do anything. And there's no effort to really make them do anything. But they'll magically disappear if you suddenly start firing. There are some areas in the game which are considered peaceful, which is kind of a good thing. I mean, you know, Bioshock, you were consistently watching out for splicers and things like that trying to kill you. So you were constantly in a situation where exploring the world was always a threatening thing, and some people would really consider that good. For me, I don't necessarily think it was, and it's nice to have a breather every once in a while. And they also tried to introduce some interesting stuff like the notion of stealing in this game, but they don't do it very well. The stealing system is actually really stupid. It's completely arbitrary. In front of a lot of NPCs, you can lift whatever's in their desks, their purses, everything, and they won't even bat an eyelid. They won't even acknowledge you there. But there are a couple of arbitrary areas in the game where if you try and do that or even enter it, people will just randomly attack you. And it does warn you, thankfully. It gives you that red text that says theft. And I'm just like, seriously? I mean, it's just, they didn't expand the system all that well. So there you go. What else? Good stuff, bad stuff. It seems so odd that I'm coming up with so many bad things about it, but if I'm totally honest, again, I'm looking to try and critique this as much as I can, because it is a well-regarded game, and I want to give you all the information I can about it. There are some bigger problems with the exploration, and I think the scripting of the events is probably the biggest one I can think of. This game's got way more scripted events than Bioshock or Bioshock 2 did. And it's, again, mostly because of Elizabeth. And what's even more annoying is that the game doesn't give you any choice. And there are elements of the game that you think, oh, I could stop this because I know something's going to happen. As a particular example, quite early on in the game, you get in an airship, there's a nun who commits suicide. Basically, she blows herself up in order to stop you from going where you're supposed to be going. Now, I went in there knowing that this would happen, and quite frankly, since I don't trust anyone, I opened fire. What happened doesn't matter. The bullets pass straight through them. The game doesn't want you killing anyone that isn't an enemy. And you can't stop any of these events. And some of them are just really contrived. Like, there's a time when you have to chase Elizabeth. In fact, that happens quite often. And you know for a fact that it doesn't matter how fast you chase Elizabeth, because you're always going to catch her at the same place. Because the game was scripted that way. And a lot of games do this. This is not unique to Bioshock whatsoever. But I was perhaps hoping that there would be a little bit more to the game that you could personally affect. And, well, there isn't. There just isn't. And that's a kind of a crying shame, I think.
Come on, let's head back to the gunsmith and finish our deal.
Alright. Get ourselves the burst gun here. There we go, that is a variant of the carbine, as you can see. There we go. Very nice, very nice. But the overall conclusion about exploration, you know, there's a lot of little nitpicks and bugbears that I came up with there. The overall conclusion is that a lot of this disbelief can be suspended. Yes, it's a facade, but it's such a well-realized one. And all games are facades, really. I mean, if you look close enough, you can pick at games and you can just tear them to pieces. And I think that that's a worthwhile thing to do. But you, at some point, have to realize that it's a video game. There are certain restrictions. There are always going to be certain restrictions. There are always going to be certain limitations that you work within. And if you can accept that, then you will have fun as a video gamer. If you can't, you're going to have serious problems. So overall, exploration-wise, it's still a joy to go rifling through drawers and finding stuff, getting different pieces of gear, finding different weapons and ammunition. I feel that hunting for ammo is less important because ammo seems to be much cheaper this time around. Scavenging for ammo in Bioshock was pretty important. Admittedly, you also tripped over it everywhere you went. Like, there was an abundance of ammo. Here, not so much, but there's a plentiful amount of vending machines, and the fact that, just the straight fact of the matter is that you can buy a lot of ammo for a very, very cheap price. And since there isn't special ammo, you're not going to pay like $50 bazillion or Silver Eagles or whatever for that kind of stuff. So, you know, there you go. So, you know, I don't find that to be too big of an issue. Now, Elizabeth, the third and perhaps the most vital component of this game. Now, you've seen what Elizabeth does every now and again. You cannot directly talk to Elizabeth, which kind of sucks. Everything that you say to Elizabeth is scripted. That's a shame. I'd like to have a conversation with her every once in a while, but that only happens when the game says that it's appropriate. It's like, can I just have a word with her? No. No, this isn't Fallout. This isn't Dragon Age. You can't do that kind of stuff. How unfortunate. How unfortunate. Bit of a lost opportunity there, I feel. But then again, I also feel that Elizabeth is a very carefully calculated character. And let me just say that as an AI companion, she is probably the best AI companion that we have ever seen in video games. I can't think of a better one. I cannot. I can think of one that's pretty reasonable. I can't even remember her name. That's so sad. The character that came along with you in Enslaved, Odyssey to the West. Do you remember that one? And then, of course, you can think about maybe Ashley, I think, was it, from Resident Evil 4. And funnily enough, I'll come on to an example of, you know, Ashley in a minute. I wonder if I can shoot that. That would be amazing. No, it doesn't do anything. Oh, well. She is a wonderful AI companion. She's also a pretty advanced AI companion. However, a lot of what she does is very much a trick. So she will stay out of your way, most of the time. Sometimes she gets in your way because the AI says, hey, I want to be here, for whatever reason. She will also, every now and again, run around and go further ahead of you. What I really like is if you're heading in the right direction, she generally runs ahead of you in a very organic manner, instead of following you everywhere. And it helps you kind of figure out exactly where you are in the world, which is quite the thing. You know, this is actually something which is a perfect marriage of game mechanics and actual storytelling. Yeah? You've got a realistic character that can kind of find her own way. But she doesn't really find her own way. She's actually only finding her own way because you're going in the right direction. It is incredibly clever. It is very smartly presented. It is a good piece of obfuscation. It is an illusion. And what a beautiful illusion it is. So well done. I am impressed in many, many ways when it comes to that. Oh, yeah. Now, what else will she do? Well, she will talk to you every now and again, and the relationship between the main character and Elizabeth is actually a pretty cool one. Yeah? It varies. It's not just, you know, it's not the standard love interest nonsense, thank God, at least from what I could see. Obviously, I'm about halfway through the game, so who the hell knows? It might end up getting a lot worse. But she, you know, she is an emotional character. She has her problems, as you might imagine. She's been locked in a tower for a while. She's a very intelligent character. She's very well written. She's a very well balanced character. She has kind of realistic fear, but she's not a damsel in distress. However, she does start to fall apart just a little bit when it comes to her actual mechanics. For a character that's so important, it is so odd that everyone ignores her. It's really weird. Outside of scripted events where she is captured and you have to get her back, which happens a couple of times, nobody even seems to realize she's there. There are actually some parts where she'll walk into a room filled with enemies before you do, and the enemies will just ignore her. Like, they won't trigger until you get in there, because they just don't see her. They don't realize she's there. She will go and hide, as you can see. Admittedly, this is the worst piece of cover I've ever seen. She's facing the enemies, for God's sake. It's not like she's actually taking cover. And she won't really contribute to the fight, aside from scavenging. Yeah? Now, the game repeatedly says, I will help you by finding items, and I will assist you in battles, and so on and so forth. But she doesn't really do that. She doesn't actually go scavenging corpses and anything like that. That doesn't happen. That is not even an illusion. That's just a lie. She will give you health at particular times, and from what I can tell, it's entirely scripted. When you go low on salts for your first time, she'll generally give you salts. When you dip really, really low on health for a while, she will then give you that health as well. Let's see if I can actually make her give me salts. Maybe she won't this time. Who knows? Maybe they put some random into it here and there. I'm just kind of burning my salts here, kind of on purpose. Yeah, she'll now say, oh, I'm low on salts. Oh, well, I don't have any this time. There we go. There's the salts. Told you. I told you she'd give me the salts, and then the salts will kind of go on a cooldown. So she'll conveniently find it at exactly the same time. She does not hunt for ammunition. She doesn't rifle through corpses. She doesn't do any of that stuff. And I don't necessarily mind that she doesn't do it, but I just don't like the fact that the game lied to me about it. And I know there's got to be some suspension of disbelief about what the characters do, but really, she doesn't do any of those things. She doesn't hunt for items either. I mean, one of the items that she needs, she's a lockpicker, right? Interesting. When you get into certain areas, you'll find doors that you can open if you've got the right amount of lockpicks. And then there are some which just, you know, they just have to be opened by her, and you don't even need a lockpick for it at all. Which is why I don't know why the hell those are even there to begin with, because the mechanic is actually pointless at that stage, because it's not any kind of resource management or anything like that. The door might as well just open for you. What is the point? Who the hell knows? I don't. I certainly don't. Anyway. I'm almost losing my trail of thought here, because this is actually a really hard video to do. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but I'm trying to get through so many thoughts here and try and stay coherent and not actually forget anything. Oh, man. I wish she did more as an actual AI partner. Basically, she's a dispenser. Yeah, she's a vending machine. She gives you stuff for no real apparent reason other than to just kind of help you out. And yes, you know, she's your companion, she's helping you out for her own self-interest. I get it, I get that. I just wish she wouldn't do it in such a transparent way. And I wish I could interact with her in any kind of meaningful respect outside of the way that the game tells me to, and outside of the scripted conversations. But what I will say is the scripted conversations are nothing short of a joy. The dialogue between DeWitt and Elizabeth is great. Across the board, it's great. It's deep, it's well layered, it's mature, it's well written, it's well voice acted. It is a great piece of story. And that comes on to the biggest point of this. Bioshock Infinite is a great piece of story. One of the best, one of the finest we have seen in recent eras. In terms of a linear game, there are not many games that match up to this. You know, you can talk about storytelling if you to think about things like, say, Planescape Torment, yeah? And certain RPG titles. You can think about it then. But we're talking about a linear FPS, and yes, the storytelling in this game is nothing short of phenomenal. It is well presented in every way, and not just in voice acting and dialogue and writing, in the way that the world is designed. There is detail everywhere for you to see, for you to gather, and for you to build a picture. And the way that the storyline seems to be developing with this whole multi-dimension thing seems like it's very much open to interpretation. I'm finding myself doubting certain things in this game, thinking, was this really not a choice, or was it deliberately this way because of the alternate realities thing? Was that why? Is there an underlying message here that I'm starting to pick up on? And if there is, then I will say this is a very intelligent game. It is incredibly smart, and I am impressed by it. I'm fairly, to be honest, I mean, Bioshock's always kind of been a thinking man shooter series anyway. So, I guess I shouldn't really expect anything else from it. But it's cool that it is the way that it is. It's cool that they managed to maintain that. And storyline-wise, it is just phenomenal. I mean, it is a work of art. And I think if you wanted an example of a game to show people that doubted that video games could tell a story as well as, say, a TV series or a movie, then you would look at Bioshock Infinite. Yeah? You would look at Bioshock Infinite and you would say, look at this game. Look at the world they built. Look at how much care and attention and detail they actually put in here. Just look at it and tell me that gaming as a medium has not evolved. That gaming can't tell a story just as well as other mediums. We are getting there. And people like Irrational Games are leading the way. And this is probably the reason that people have been so taken by this game. It's an impressive looking world, it's a pretty world, it's a beautiful world aesthetically, it's a dark world in many different ways, and it deals with some very mature ideas in a way that I have never really seen done before. The way that it deals with racism, for instance. There's a lot of white supremacist stuff in this game. But the weird thing about it is that you would expect, to be instantly abhorred by the notion that, oh, racism? Ugh, this is such an outdated ideal. But the way that it presents it is actually so mature and so smart. There are, worryingly enough, times when you end up finding yourself saying, huh, he kind of has a point. And then you immediately catch yourself, it's like, what the hell, am I racist too? No, it's just because the way that it's written and the way that they present these they are barbaric ideals, don't get me wrong, but the way that they actually present them is so impressive that you can't help but feel that the game is treating you like an adult and saying, I am gonna throw some very difficult concepts at you. These are difficult things to deal with. These are moral issues. And I'm gonna throw them at you, and I'm gonna show you how these guys think. And I'm going to show you why they think that way. And I'm going to, by the end of it, have you thinking, they're not wrong in every way. I can kind of see, based on the environment that they grew up in and the context, why they think this way, even though it's wrong. And that's a triumph, because most games don't deal with racism well at all. Like, think about racism in Dragon Age. That's a game that did it reasonably well. But it's still very basic. It's like, that game is racism bad. And that's it. The racism against the elves in that game, there's no way you can possibly understand it. No reason. There's no good reason. An NPC never gives a good reason for people to actually be racist to elves. You are just a dick if you are racist to elves, right? You are just a dick. And you never see that point of view. But in this game, you kind of do. And that's actually kind of scary. And it's cool that a game can make you think like that. It's cool that a game can actually evoke such interesting and controversial ideas and do it without being ham-fisted. Because most games are ham-fisted in that regard. Irrational are one of the only companies that seem to be able to deal with that kind of subject matter. And bravo to them as a result. Bra-frickin-vo. But here is the kicker. Here's the big thing. The combination of mechanics and the way that the narrative is presented don't necessarily gel. But in more cases, it's not because they don't gel, it's just because one has been compromised in favor of the other. And I've been debating to myself whether or not, because of the way that they're telling the story in this game, some mechanics have ended up being compromised. There are some, definitely. I think that because of the way that the narrative works with the AI character Elizabeth, there really is no way for you to get away from the fact that a lot of the scripted stuff and the linearity of the game is as a result of Elizabeth being in it. If Elizabeth was not in it, you would not necessarily have that problem, right? You get the idea. Hopefully you do. Stuff like the gunplay and things like that, you could have a very good story and also have good gunplay. That is just the developer not doing a particularly good job. I don't think one compromises the other there, but I think very similar to stuff like Walking Dead and to a lesser extent Heavy Rain, it is an example of a game that does storytelling so incredibly well that it could gain acceptance in mainstream media and good stuff like that. You could point to this game and say, this is a game that does storytelling really well. And but right back to the start. What an interesting little thing we have found ourselves here. Anyway, this is a game that stuff happens really well. The story is told really, really well, and the mechanics don't quite live up to that. And the thing is, if they did, then this would probably be one of the best games ever made. As it stands, it is one of the best stories ever told, in my honest opinion. It really is. It is a marvel. It's obvious that they have put so much work into this game, and it has paid off in spades. It impresses in many, many ways, but you have to kind of get over the idea that the world is beautiful and enthralling and start to dig into the nitty-gritty of it, and what you will see, if you do, is that the game has a lot of problems. It has many faults, it has many things that should not be considered to be superb. They quite simply are not. So as a story, one of the most incredible stories ever told in gaming so far, and I'm told the ending is absolutely phenomenal. As a game, it is merely above average. I don't really get where the 9.5s and 10s are coming from. I think that these are from reviewers that are ignoring aspects of its gameplay in favor of the fact that it is an incredibly compelling story. And maybe that's what they want out of games. And I don't blame them, because, you know, sometimes I want stuff like that. Like, Journey's a good example. For a 1.5 hour game, I want a game that kind of tells me a story through the world and ends satisfying, and I'm like, you know, I had a good 90 minutes here. But in a 10 to 12 hour game that is primarily a shooter, I want the shooting elements to be good too. And they're not. They're merely adequate. And nothing about this game should be merely adequate. The shooting, the combat, the actual mechanics of the game let down the world, and what a crying shame that is. What a crying shame that is. That shouldn't have happened. But it did. Unfortunately, it did. And this is the situation we're now in. So, Bioshock Infinite. I'll get to the end of this, and you know what? I think once I get to the end of this, I might end up doing like a spoiler video where I just like go into the ending and my complete thoughts, because I think this is one of those rare games where it's sort of justified. I'm having fun with it. I really am. I'm having joyful fun with it at times. Just the way the world is designed, the sound design, something I didn't touch on, just... The sound design is almost so perfect. Like, the only thing really lacking in the sound design is the fact that the gun sounds just aren't all that good. Like, if that's all you can take away from it and say, oh, well, this is the worst part of the sound design, then they did a pretty damn good job. The way that the music and the discordant tones punctuate the combat, the overall voice acting, the number of period songs that they put into the game, which obviously is kind of a Bioshock thing, really. It's a staple of the series. It helps to draw you into this absolutely wonderful world. And it does an incredible job of it. And hey, if you can suspend that disbelief, then you may very well believe that this is the best game of the year. I'm a gamer that is maybe sadly mechanical in nature. I appreciate game mechanics more than I appreciate good story. I appreciate solid game mechanics. I want enjoyable games. I'll play a game with no story whatsoever as long as it has enjoyable game mechanics. And, you know, this game doesn't exactly have the most perfect ones. Some parts are good, some parts not so much in that regard. Anyway, I think I'm rambling now, so, you know, that is my conclusion, I guess. This is where I am with Bioshock Infinite. That's what I think about it. I can't really think of anything I've missed, but I probably have, because, hey, you know, this is a complex game. It is very much a work of gaming art that needs a lot of time dedicated to it, and I think the reason I dedicate so much time to critiquing it is because... What the hell is going on in this room? It's completely empty. As I said, the reason I spend so much time critiquing it is because I respect what they've done, and I find it very unfortunate that it wasn't the perfect game. Eventually, maybe we'll find that perfect game. Bioshock isn't it. It's not. It's a damn fine piece of work, but it's not that perfect game. Alright, folks. That pretty much wraps me up, I think, for my WTF Is of Bioshock Infinite. If you've gotten this far, thank you very much for watching. Obviously, this has been a long one. And I hope you have an interesting discussion from this. I hope that my thoughts have somehow inspired you to think about something. Even if it's like, I hate you, TotalBiscuit, you have no taste in video games, I'm unsubbing. If that's your thoughts, alright. Okay, that's how you feel. No biggie. I have opinions about video games, it's my job. My name's been TotalBiscuit, thank you very much for watching. And I'll see you next time.